being a guy that was completely unprepared for prison, I can tell you that being in that cell, like I think being in that cell for that first night and them closing the doors and not having your cell phone or any way, and nobody's paying attention to you. You can't snap your fingers. You can't pick up the phone. You can't you go into a deep depression. You sleep for whatever, 10 or 12 hours. But when you wake up the next day, man, it's a rough. And he's going, it's rough. Not that he doesn't have it coming. He's got it coming. But I think what's interesting and what's telling, and I'm going to get to the point where I am going to talk about what's probably going to happen with this guy, because a lot of people are making these huge, bold predictions. So I want to throw my hat in the ring. I would say that what's comical to me is that this is a guy that apparently, has gotten a long, long way simply by bullshitting people. A lot like Elizabeth Holmes, like she bullshitted one or two people and then they fell for it. And then she took that and she parlayed that into some more money and parlayed that into some more money. What's amazing is you couldn't complete, you did one semester at Stanford. Like at least this guy graduated, went to a prestigious college, graduated, worked for some hedge fund or money market institution, something, and apparently figured out how to trade cryptocurrency kind of like on almost like a Forex market, and made supposedly, hundreds of millions, if not whatever. I don't even know what the figure is now, $4 billion or something outrageous, right? And what's funny about that is that there's the likelihood is that never happened, or that it's very possible that he wasn't nearly as successful. Because the truth is, if you give somebody $1 million, I can convince you that I've got $1 billion. With $1 million, just by leveraging it correctly, I can make it look like I'm kicking ass. And the moment people start giving you money and you're living off their money, it's even easier to look even bigger, because now everybody's giving you money. So he took some success, if there was success at all. He took some success, he parlayed that into something else and into something else and into something else. Before you know it, people are giving him billions of dollars, and they legitimately obviously are. He took, he started Alameda, then it went to FTX. It's convoluted, and this is very much a meathead perspective of somebody who knows very little about it, but I do know scams. And his scam was just smoke and mirrors, which he was managed to keep going for several years. But here's the part that really cracks me up, is that because he was so emboldened by his success, when it all fell apart, he's been going on like a media campaign of interviews and podcasts, and he's been trying to kind of explain that it was more of a mistake than it was a fraud. Like if there was fraud, he wasn't involved. So here's what kills me. It's like cheating on your taxes. Let me give you an example. If you cheat on your taxes, and you owe the IRS $100,000. Okay, and you cheated on your taxes, you owe them money, that's fraud. That's tax fraud. What if you took deductions that you genuinely thought you were entitled to, and you find out later that you made a mistake? Well, that's different. That's just a mistake. It's a civil action. You still owe the IRS $100,000, but you don't go to prison. He's trying to spin the narrative in such a way that he can say, I made mistakes, but I didn't commit fraud. And if there was fraud committed, if there was commingling of funds, I didn't really know about it. And I'm not liable for it because my girlfriend was running that company. So she may have done some things wrong. I certainly didn't. And, you can argue the fact that you put a girl that has no experience at all in the market, not only the crypto market, any kind of market, the stock market, like this chick can't balance her checkbook. So, you guys are, there's so many things that have come out. They're using QuickBooks to do, complex taxes and do their books. They're, everybody's heard, everybody's heard about them. You're requesting payment for things or to spend money on stuff. And if you get a thumbs up or a smiley emoji, that's an okay. If you get a down emoji or you get a sad emoji, that's a no. And they're using platforms that automatically erase any types of texts. It just, the more they look into it, the more the guy that's now the CEO of the company, who also, I think, was it Enron that he took over as the CEO of Enron to kind of help manage the Enron debacle. Like, this guy's taken over, and this guy's like, literally, it's so bad. This guy's he's not even trying to hold back. He's just saying it's a complete fucking shit show. With that said, I think that Sam went on this whole kind of a media campaign, and he's trying to kind of tweak the narrative in such a way that he can say it's civil, or he can at least say, I'm not criminally liable. Or if he is criminally liable, he's trying to put it off on other key players.
Law enforcement often questions him, not because he's suspected of a crime, but because they find him fascinating. He is the most interesting man in the world.
I don't typically commit crime, but when I do, it's bank fraud. Stay greedy, my friends.
Support the channel. Join Matthew Cox's Patreon.
So here's the interesting thing. Sam's ex-girlfriend, Caroline Ellison, everybody thought she was in the Bahamas with Sam, right? Well, about a week ago, she was spotted at a coffee shop 5 or 6 blocks from the New York FBI's field office. And I think, if I remember this right, I think she was with a few other people in the upper echelon of FTX. So Sam went on did kind of a little blitzkrieg, shock and awe campaign with the media, where he thought, I'm going to spin this and blame this on her. And what she did was she went probably to the FBI and said, listen. Now, she had probably done this already. He's assuming she's going to testify, or maybe she just took off and he thought, oh, she took off and I'm going to go ahead and blame everything on her. And maybe she knew that was coming and went there. I don't know exactly what happened, but either way, he is trying to blame everything on her in the media because in his simplistic mind, now I'm not saying he's not brilliant and a genius, but the fact is, in that age group, a lot of people are disconnected to how things really work. And being a young guy who's managed to play video games while he's pitching hedge funds to give him billions of dollars, and then they give him the money, like, he's living in a fantasy world. I assure you, sitting in prison right now, he's getting a dose of reality, but he's living in a little fantasy where he's probably thinking to himself that the media somehow or another is going to be able to help him if he can just spin the narrative and tweak it a little bit so that he doesn't look quite as culpable of this crime, and shifts the blame to Caroline. Then he could maybe get off with a few years in a camp, or maybe not go to prison at all, or any number of things that the people that are around him are telling him. And guys were saying that, because SBF had given so much money to various political parties, and I think it's up to, they're saying $1 billion at this point. They were saying 40 million. Now they're saying it's up to $1 billion to the Democratic Party or something. But who knows? He gave money to the Republican Party too, but the vast majority of it supposedly was to the Democrats. I don't know if it's $1 billion, but that is what everybody seems to be saying now. It doesn't matter. The point is that I was talking to Brett, and Brett had given I'm talking about Brett Cassidy, not Brett Johnson. But Brett Cassidy, he was saying, listen, he said, I gave tons of money We gave tons of money to different senators and political parties. He said, the first thing that happens when something like this comes out, you think you can call them and say, hey, man, I gave you guys $10 million. I need you to help me out. That's not what's going to happen at all. What they do is they turn around and they haul ass. They stop accepting your phone calls. They turn on you. Immediately, they turn on you. So the idea that he gave a bunch of money to the Democrats and they're going to protect him, no, they're not. They're not going to protect this guy. What they're going to do just to let everybody know that he was not buying political favors, they're going to be extra hard on him. Oh, well, we have to make an example of him. Not that I can think of anybody better to make an example of than this knucklehead. Now, he's spoken with lawyers who I'm sure have told him just how devastating the situation is, how dangerous, how serious the situation is. But, people can tell you how serious something is and you don't really realize it. Like, probably they're telling him, listen, you're gonna, if you cooperate, you go in, you help the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office, you help the government recover as much money as possible. You tell them what everybody did, who knew, what was going on, how long it's been going on, how long you knew this was all a fraud, and who helped you pull it off. Then you're probably looking at doing, 20 years, and maybe you can wiggle it down with a 5K1 or some Rule 35s. Those are 5K1 is when you cooperate, and at sentencing, the government requests that the court cut your sentence or give you a reduced sentence as a result of your cooperation. A 5K1 is you get sentenced, you go to jail, and your cooperation comes later. So you were given 20 years, and then you gave them a bunch of advice, and then when Caroline ends up getting 20 years, they cut your sentence by 5 or 6 years. And then when somebody else in the company that you cooperated against, they get sentenced, then the government comes and gives you another 5 years. So you may end up doing 10 years. So his criminal defense attorneys are probably telling him, look, Sam, you're probably going to get 20 years. Like, most likely, even though guys are talking about them stacking, it's called stacking the charges, he's looking at 150 years or he's looking at 200 years or, listen, they're not going to, I understand they're calling him the new Bernie Madoff, but most likely what happens, just like with Elizabeth Holmes, which I thought should have gotten 20 years, she got less than that. And she had a massive scam too. And I understand it's not in comparison, it's maybe not as big. And Bernie Madoff, the problem with Bernie Madoff is his crime was so overwhelmingly vicious. A lot of Sam's crime is going to almost be looked at like it's an institutional fraud. And although the guidelines don't quite work out like this. Like the U.S. sentencing guidelines don't typically differentiate between corporate frauds and individual frauds. Still public opinion and judges, and U.S. attorneys will look more favorably on someone who stole $10 million from Bank of America as opposed to somebody who stole $10 million from 1,000 retirees. Like, they're going to say, you could say, oh, well, the victim was Bank of America. They lost $10 million. You could say, wow, that's devastating. Like, that's a huge loss. And it is a huge loss, but it's not really an individual. So if they said, well, look, he stole $1 million from, or $100,000 from a retiree, they're going to be pissed. Like, that's as bad as stealing $10 million from, even though the guidelines don't really say that. The sentencing guidelines don't really. Now they will make an exception for stealing more than, let's say, $1 million from a financial institution. That would be an enhancement, and stealing more than $1 million from an individual would also be an enhancement. But stealing any money from a vulnerable victim would also be an enhancement. So, it's hard to say, but they would probably still look at it pretty much the same. But the judge, on the other hand, the U.S. attorney, who has a lot of leeway, would most likely would not be as upset with someone stealing from an institution as they are from stealing from retirees. And to be honest, like, it's not like there's a bunch of people coming out saying, I put all my money into crypto and now I'm left with nothing but Social Security and I have to live on the street and I lost my home. Like, nobody's really coming out to say that. Most of the people that have been hit are what are called sophisticated investors. Investors that are financially savvy. They sign paperwork that say they're financially savvy. They sign paperwork that say that what they're investing isn't going to harm them if they lose it, essentially. So I think that he is probably looking at 20 years. I'm sure his lawyers told him, you need to go in and cooperate. With your cooperation, we can probably get that 20 years down to 10 years. In Sam's mind, he cannot fathom doing 10 years. And because he's been so successful at fooling people over the years, he most likely went against his lawyer's advice and said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go on a media campaign, and I'm going to go on and go do all these interviews, and I'm going to get the media and everybody on my side and tweak it in such a way that it doesn't look like I really fucked up. And that if anybody fucked up, it's my ex-girlfriend who really had no right to be running Alameda. I mean, look, even if you said, hey, I'm sure she's a nice person, but she was so flippant about just losing tons of money and joking about how she's made multiple bad trades. I watched some podcast where she's joking like, oh, you don't even need math. I mean, she comes off like such a dingbat. So really, in a way, you kind of need someone that much. I mean, she's not a dingbat. I know she's a sharp chick. She's got a college degree and like, I think it was finance or something like, but for God's sakes, you're dealing with people's money. Even if you have to fake it, try and look competent. So she goes on some podcast, looks like a complete dingbat, joking around about losing money and not really. And you'd be shocked how ridiculous, how haphazard we're running this company. And it's just like, Jesus, God Almighty. So you really need a patsy like that. To be honest, if I was going to run another scam, I definitely going to keep around some patsy I can blame everything on. So he's blaming everything on her, but in his mind, he probably thought he's going to blame everything on her, shift all the responsibility. And what she did was she did the smart thing. She went to the FBI, and I think she probably brought along a couple of his henchmen with her, just to back her up on what she's saying, which is, I have no doubt. Listen, I told this guy that I didn't know what I was doing. He said it didn't matter. He'd run the whole thing. He just needed to put me there for my name. He said I can just help out as long as I sign the documents. But he knew I didn't know what was going on. I knew that I didn't know what was going on. I said it multiple times on podcasts. I didn't know what was going on. He was the one calling all the shots. We were all living together. We were doing drugs. We're fucking each other. We're buying nice cars. We're buying mansions in the Bahamas. We're giving money to all these political parties because we figured if someday we got in trouble, they would help us, because that's what stupid people think. They think, well, if you give a whole bunch of money to the politicians, they'll save you. The truth is, the politicians run the other way because they don't want anything to do with you. They're the first person to turn their back on you. So giving money to the politicians is a joke. They're not going to help you. I don't know anybody that thinks they're going to help. They're going to help you. I mean, except for the people in the comment section that are like, oh, but these are guys that work at Walmart. They work in the back room at Walmart, and they think they know how the whole world works. They got it all figured out, but they're still working at Walmart. So, and God bless them. They're the backbone of America. I love them. Thank God for them. But listen, bro, just because you give $40 million to a bunch of Democrats across the board doesn't mean that you're walking I would say Sam Bankman-Fried he's going to be, one, he was denied bail. That's crazy. Yeah, I know. It's insane that they denied him bail. In the Bahamas, stuck him in this rat-infested, roach-infested, hot prison in the Bahamas. I have no doubt that he's probably saying as a result of his asthma and the fact that he's rich and has always been rich, it's cruel and unusual punishment. But that's probably not going to work. And eventually, he might fight extradition. I doubt it, but he might try. I've known people who have fought extradition for years. But let's face it, I'd rather do 20 years in a federal prison than have to do 5 years. Well, 10. Let's go 10. Then 10 years in that bohemian nightmare where he is.
He's been known to cure insecurity just with his laugh. His organ donation card lists his charisma. His smile is so contagious. Vaccines have been created for it. He is the most interesting man in the world.
I don't typically commit crime, but when I do, it's bank fraud. Stay greedy, my friends.
Support the channel. Join Matthew Cox's Patreon.
So I think what happens is he's going to be extradited. They'll stick him on a plane. The FBI will fly him over here. His girl's already buried him. He'll get there. He'll say, I can cooperate. And it'll be too late. It's too late. He could have done that 2 weeks ago. The moment this whole thing imploded, he should have been on the first plane. He should have said, listen. He should have got everybody together and said, listen, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to take the heat and I'm going to tell them you guys didn't know anything. And I suggest you guys all go to trial. If they charge you, you go to trial and I'm going to be on the witness list and I'm going to testify that you guys didn't know anything. And then I would go, and when these people got indicted, thinking, well, Sam's going to cut me. He's going to cut me loose. And he's going to get on the stand. I get on the stand and I testify against every single one of them. And I get my 20 years knocked down to about 5. By that time, you're basically, by the time all the trials play out, you basically, you'd be time he could take RDAP, get a year off. And then he could go for a halfway house. He'd probably get a year and a halfway house. He'll probably do like 2.5 years. But old Sam's not fast enough. He doesn't watch my show. That's the problem. He doesn't watch Inside True Crime. If he watched Inside True Crime, he would know if you're extremely guilty, you don't go on a bunch of programs and say, yeah, I'm guilty, kinda. You go in and cooperate immediately. He should have gone in and cooperated. He didn't. It's just stupid. And now he's doomed. Now he's basically going to have to take a plea. I'd be shocked. The only way I think he would go to trial is if the U.S. attorney came in and said something along the lines of, look, you got to plead guilty and we're going to give you 100 years. Like, I think that that's the only way he would go to trial. They gave him an unreasonable plea where he had nothing to lose to go to trial. Now, why would the U.S. attorney do that? The U.S. attorney would do that because they want to be the guy that put him away for 100 years. That makes him look good. So if he gets a U.S. attorney that has political aspirations, then most likely they'll offer him something that they think he will turn down. 50 years, 80, 100, 200. When they offered Bernie Madoff, like, oh, you go in, you're going to plead guilty to all these charges and we're going to ask for fucking 150 years. Bernie Madoff knew he was so fucking overwhelmingly guilty that he was like, I'm going to fucking die in prison anyway. I don't give a shit. I'll plead guilty. So he pled guilty. Went to prison, worked in commissary in Buckman prison or what? I forget which prison he was in. He worked in prison for a while and he worked in the commissary calling out prisoners' names and eventually got sick and he died. So, so I think Sam Bankman-Fried will most likely, hopefully, they'll give him a reasonable plea. He gets 20 years. Maybe he gets 30. He'll cooperate. He'll tell them everything they want to know. But really, to be honest, Caroline has done that. she's buried him. The other people have buried him. Everybody's rolling over on each other. These guys aren't gangsters. Nobody's going to die over this. Unless Hillary Clinton got money from him and she kills him. I'm just joking. We got to cut that out. No, you can leave it. I'm joking. No, it's Hillary or Bill Clinton, or because they always joke that they had much. Or Epstein got killed. Who killed Epstein? I forget who they say killed Epstein, which he did not get killed. He just hung himself. Anyway, I digress. Point is, Sammy Boy is going to get, I'm going to say 20 years. So let's say he gets 20 years. I know what you're thinking. He's going to get 20 years in a maximum state prison, maximum security prison, 20 years, and he's going to get raped, and that's not going to happen. Here's what's going to happen. He's going to go to a medium security prison. So they'll send him to a medium, and not that he should be let me put it this way. They call it your security level. His security level will actually be camp. He'll have what they call camp points. But you can't go to a camp if you have more than 10 years to do on your sentence, right? So if you have less than 10 years, you can go to a camp. If you have less than 20 years, you can go to a low. So now that I think about it, yeah, he probably won't go. He probably won't go to a medium. He could go to a medium if there's like they have different things they can put on you. I would say most likely, yeah, he doesn't go to a medium. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said medium. It's really a low. He will probably go to a low security prison. Now, if he gets over 20 years, let's say he gets 25 years, right? Like I got 26 years, I was sent to a medium. I had camp points. After I was at the medium for 3 years, I went to a low because I now had under 20, I had 20 years, less than 20 years to go for incarceration. So, then if I had gotten down to where I had less than 10 years to go, they would have moved me to a camp. Luckily, I knocked off 13 years. Well, sorry, 12 years. 12 years. I knocked 12 years off my sentence. So what I'm suggesting happens is he'll get 20 years on a plea. He goes to a low. Caroline and the upper echelon of Alameda and FTX, the upper echelon players, which are all going to try and say they just didn't know anything. Like this was all Sam's doing, and I don't think the U.S. attorney. I don't think the U.S. attorney is going to buy that. I think most likely they'll all be indicted, and they'll probably get 5 years apiece for cooperating. They may get 10 years, and then he'll recommend a departure. They'll get 5. They'll all go to RDAP, and then they'll all get halfway house. They'll end up doing like 2.5 years, 3 years. Old Sammy, I think, gets 20 years. He's going to go to a low. He's not going to have a problem in a low. They're going to send him to a low with a bunch of sex offenders, and he's going to be fine. He's going to fit in great. His parents will put money on his books. He'll get nasty letters from people that lost money. I used to get nasty letters from people that just saw me on American Greed. I used to get letters. Did I ever tell you about that? Yeah. I mentioned the guy that would write letters talking about how I looked like a monkey. He used to always write me and say, "You look like a monkey." Yeah. He used to say, "And now you have to eat prison food." And he used to say that there were fingernails and semen in the food that I was eating. It was disgusting. It was really, he had some problems, but he did write me for several years. I could never write him back, which was sad because, I felt like we were down. We were doing time together. He was there for me. I would have liked to have written him back. It would have been funny. It would have been a funny exchange. So anyway, my point is that's what I think is going to happen to old Sam Bankman. I think he's going to go to prison. There's going to be a ton of shows, probably be on American Greed if it's still running. There's going to be a ton of little TV programs on him, and he's going to end up in a low security. And maybe he'll write a memoir. He'll probably tell people how to trade, crypto, and which he doesn't apparently know anything about. And he'll start up a little investment club. He might teach He might teach like an ACE course. He'll be like a teacher where he teaches guys how to buy and sell. Maybe he'll get into Forex. I don't know. But I know that he probably teach GED. There's probably going to be a lot of similarities between his time and my time. Only, I was one of the cool guys, and he's not. He's not a cool guy. He's really got some issues. But the problem is there's so many. He'll click up with a bunch of sex offenders because he very much has that sex offender vibe about him. And I hate to say that, maybe he's a great guy. I'm not saying he's a weirdo or anything. I'm just saying in general he has that feel to him. But that's where I'm going. I've been rambling. So I appreciate you guys watching. I can't wait to see what happens with this guy. Thank you. And also I have a Patreon. I'm not opposed to you donating to my Patreon. And all the links are in the description. But thank you very much. I appreciate it. See ya.